Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. I want you to imagine we're standing right in the middle of room 214 of the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. It was in this exact room, back in 1972, that a break-in was overseen that would literally bring down a presidency. But we're actually not here to talk about the politics today. We're here to uncover the hidden force that really drives human behavior and alters the course of American history. I'm talking about money.
And you know what? This brilliantly illustrates our very first point. When you think of Watergate, you probably think of that famous phrase, supposedly whispered by the informant, deep throat, in some dark, creepy parking garage. But history is kind of funny. It's often clouded by myths. And this iconic line, it's actually one of them.
Yeah, that famous phrase was completely invented by a Hollywood screenwriter for the movie All the President's Men. The real journalists, Woodward and Bernstein, they never actually wrote it in their original reporting. But even though Hollywood totally made the line up, the core truth of it remains absolutely essential. To understand what really happened with Richard Nixon and the whole Watergate scandal, you can't just look at the politics. You have to investigate the ledgers.
See, Nixon always wanted a seat at the wealthy kids' table. And it started early. Back in 1952, backers set up a secret slush fund to support his lifestyle. Fast forward to 1957, and billionaire Howard Hughes loans his brother $25,000 for a burger chain. Then, by 1968, Hughes is funneling $100,000 bribes straight to Nixon's bagman for estate improvements. It's wild. And this financial web directly triggered the Watergate break-in. Nixon was absolutely terrified the Democrats knew about these bribes. So the break-in wasn't just about politics, it was an attempt to protect his money. And once those burglars were caught, man, that financial web only grew. Nixon's team ultimately had to drop up to $1 million in blackmail money just to keep the Watergate defendants quiet. $1 million. His henchmen literally acted out heist movie fantasies, hiding cash in phone booths, under park benches, airport lockers, you name it. That slush fund was absolutely massive. So, if following the money completely changes our understanding of Watergate, just wait until you see what it does to the rest of American history. Today we're going to look squarely at the ledger, to uncover the business of the Confederacy, the corporate greed behind the Transcontinental Railroad, and finally, the actual price tag of the Cold War. Section 1. The business of the Confederacy, the financial engine of the South. Let's time travel back to the 19th century and examine the vast economic machinery hiding behind those romanticized, cinematic myths of the American Civil War.
For over a century, we've been fed this false, lost cause narrative. You know the one? Painting the Civil War as this gallant struggle over abstract states' rights filled with noble Southern chivalry. But the financial reality? It's starkly different. The South was an absolute industrial behemoth. Global demand for textiles made king cotton incredibly lucrative. And that entire enterprise was fueled entirely by the forced labor of enslaved human beings. This brutal system made the South wealthier than almost any European nation at the time, except for England.
And the thing is, we don't even have to guess at their motives. The leaders at the time were brutally honest about their financial incentives. Just look at the Mississippi Declaration of Secession. They explicitly state that their position is tied to slavery, which they literally call the greatest material interest of the world. They even warn that a blow to slavery is a blow to commerce. They were fighting to protect a highly profitable economic system, plain and simple. But hey, make no mistake, the North was just as driven by transactional wealth. Up north, the war proved incredibly profitable for speculators and industrialists. Perhaps nothing illustrates this better than the draft laws. Get this, a wealthy man could legally avoid the military draft by paying a $300 substitute fee. Now that was about the annual income of a working man at the time. This massive inequality sparked 4 days of full-on riots in New York City, the worst civil uprising in American history. It really proves that war is often a bloody business avoided by those with enough cash to buy their way out.
Moving on to Section 2. Transcontinental Railroad and Corporate Greed. Manifest destiny or monopoly. Let's step into the Gilded Age. We often picture the creation of the railroad as this rugged American expansion, right? But in reality, it was the birth of the modern corporate monopoly.
The crucial takeaway here is that tycoons like Leland Stanford didn't just build a train across the country. They practically wrote the playbook on defrauding Washington. To pull off this massive project, they used a few key strategies. First, they distributed company stocks straight to members of Congress to ensure there was zero government oversight. Sneaky, right? Second, because the federal government paid them for every single mile of track laid, they intentionally built winding, circuitous routes to siphon millions in extra payouts.
And third, they maximize profits by exploiting cheap labor, heavily relying on Chinese immigrants who are paid totally unfair wages and forced into the most dangerous jobs.
All of this systemic greed culminated in one of the most spectacular frauds of the 19th century, the Credit Mobilier scandal. Basically, the Union Pacific Railroad operators set up a shell company and double-billed the American taxpayers for the cost of construction. They literally charged the U.S. government twice the actual cost and pocketed the massive difference.
Now, to make absolutely sure nobody in power looked too closely at those fraudulent books, the tycoons spread the wealth around. They paid off the Speaker of the House, 4 U.S. senators, the Secretary of the Treasury, and, get this, even the Vice President of the United States. It was an astounding top-to-bottom level of bipartisan corruption. It really shows just how deeply the money trail infected Washington. As a fun little historical footnote to this era of unbelievable wealth, it actually proves that people do eventually follow the money trail. Back in 1975, administrators at Stanford University asked the student body to vote on a new mascot to represent the school, which, remember, was founded by rail tycoon Leland Stanford. Well, the students cheekily and overwhelmingly voted for the Stanford Robber Barons. Obviously, the administration didn't go for it, but those students, they definitely knew their history.
All right, Section 3, bankrupting the Soviet Union, the price tag of the Cold War. Fast forward to the late 20th century, we're usually taught that the US-Soviet conflict was strictly a battle of profound political ideologies, democracy versus communism. But when you check the ledger, it becomes crystal clear that it was actually the most expensive economic war of attrition in human history.
The economic disconnect here was just staggering. On one side, you had the United States dropping $2 billion on a single B-2 stealth bomber, funding the astronomical Star Wars space missile defense program, and sparking the whole personal computer revolution. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was draining a massive 20% of its total GDP just to keep up militarily, and their citizens suffered horribly for it. A Soviet citizen faced a 15-year waitlist just to get a new apartment, and only 1 in 3 of those apartments even had hot water. That is a massive disconnect.
And this staggering financial disparity, it wasn't an accident at all. It was a deliberate, documented tactic. President Ronald Reagan recognized that the U.S. economy was a weapon. In his own diary, he wrote, "If we can cut off their credit, they'll have to yell uncle or starve." The strategy was literally to use America's massive wealth to outspend and totally bankrupt the Soviet Union.
But honestly, the ultimate weapon wasn't a nuclear missile or a stealth bomber. It was the sheer allure of Western wealth. Think about this. When the American movie Wall Street screened in Moscow in 1990, it highlighted a massive cultural divide. American audiences watched Michael Douglas's character Gordon Gekko and saw a dark indictment of reckless capitalism. But the Soviet audience? They saw a guy with tailored shirts, yachts, limousines with built-in TVs. To them, it was stunning affluence porn. When Gekko said greed is good, the Russian audience literally exploded in applause. They desperately wanted what the West had.
So ultimately, the Cold War effectively ended not with a bang, but with a shopping cart. Seriously. In 1989, Soviet leader Boris Yeltsin made an unscheduled stop at a totally standard supermarket in Houston, Texas. Seeing the unimaginable riches, just aisles and aisles of fresh meat, produce, 20 different kinds of pasta, it completely destroyed his lifelong belief in communism. He realized instantly that a system failing to provide basic groceries could never ever compete with one offering endless abundance.
From secret Watergate bribes hidden in phone booths, to Civil War profiteering, to railroad tycoons buying off the government, and finally, grocery store diplomacy ending the Cold War, the ledger always reveals the truth. Following the money strips away the myths and shows us the real engine of human behavior. Which leaves us with one final provocative question to consider. Look at the headlines right now. What major historical event unfolding today is secretly being driven by the money trail? Keep your eyes on the ledger, and thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.